is based on that. How did it read to you? How did it feel reading this book?
Mm-hmm.
It made me shiver when I was reading it completely. I mean, it's so described in detail, and the psyche of all the people, not only the two boys, but the family, everybody. It makes you feel really, it is disturbing. I read it for the first time.
It was the first time, yeah.
Yeah, this is my first time.
Yeah, for me it was the first time as well. And I found it very harrowing. And, you know, not only the murder, which was horrible, and all the description, but the story behind these two guys. And, you know, all the situation that they lived when they were children and all that. Oh, it was horrible.
Yes.
Oof.
Hi, Carmen.
It was my first time as well, and it took me quite a few days to get in the book. But once I got in the book, you know, I was completely absorbed. My daughter said to me today, "You are obsessed by this book, Mom," because I took a magnifying glass to see the tattoos they had on their arms.
Yeah.
Because I've got a heart, or I mean I've got a heart.
Okay.
So there's a picture of them here, and it took me a lot. It took me a while to understand that this was Dick, because I saw the pictures afterwards.
Yeah.
Me too.
But I mean, to me, it's wonderful. I was amazed, and I loved it, and I loved the way he described the scenery, the characters, and relationships, the dialogues, the letters, everything. I was, I am so happy I read it. And if it took 5 years to Truman Capote to write this, I think we could talk about this book for another 5 years.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
There are 100 books inside it. So amazed.
But didn't you distinguish them perfectly by the description he makes about the eyes?
Well, do you know what I did? I wrote the names down, and I wrote the characteristics of each of them. This is this, and this is that. This is the one who didn't have a father, or who lived with his father. This is the one who had family. You know, I had to write it down, because, I mean, it's hard to me remember foreign names. And of course he was, and the thing that works so fine, it's like, I always remember Vargas Llosa in this respect, because Vargas Llosa usually writes 2 stories at the same time, and this is the same. And it is so well written, and you switch from one story to the other. I mean, the guys, murderers, and the village, the scenery, the family. And
the family.
And right till the end, I mean, I was amazed, and I was just saying how good it was. I mean, the vocabulary, the rhythm, everything.
Yeah, the descriptions are fantastic.
I had a little problem reading it, because I have the same copy as my sister, and when I started reading the book, I assigned the names in the wrong way. So for me, Perry was the Perry was the thin one, and Dick was the other one. And when I realized that I was wrong with the pictures, for me it was really difficult to change this in my mind. But I make a big effort, and I think I succeed. At the end of the book, I knew perfectly who were them in physically. I mean, I had read it when as a teenager, of course in Spanish, and I had some memories of the book, but I remembered about the book when I read that so long ago, just the crime and the murder and this violence. But now reading it again, I think there are many more things inside, and I think I've enjoyed it much more than when I was teenager. I think there are many things inside this way of writing. This you are reading something. It's like just like in a way reading the newspaper, and but he's telling you so complex a story, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many things I can say, but yeah, I think I will.
I think just kind of just to expand a little bit of what Karen was saying, when you consider that this was a result of an enormous amount of work, research, interviews, transcripts, you kind of, and I think we've had the luxury of reading Breakfast at Tiffany's last year,
Yes,
which of course is a work of imaginative fiction and is very short. I mean, it's 100 pages. And we also read one of his short stories, his Christmas story. And so these are clearly stories coming out of a literary imagination, which is entirely producing its own material. Sorry. This is very different because this is an extraordinarily complex piece of journalistic research resulting in a book of 340 pages. And you just kind of think to yourself, what kind of discipline, mind, drive does it take to spend 5 years, well, first of all, to spend years collecting material and then years paring that down, stripping it away, deciding how you're going to present it, and then deciding to do it as a novel, as a kind of journalistic novel. Because true crime stories were very popular, but to actually find this genre, which is part novel, part journalism. And of course, now we know from more recent research or more recent things, is that Capote developed a very close relationship to one of these murderers. And of course, Capote himself was gay. Yeah. And there's very clear from the subtext of this that these two guys are also gay, and are struggling with, along with everything else, with their sexuality. And so you just think, what kind of emotional investment did he put into this? I mean, if anyone dares say, Capote, well, he was an alcoholic, I'm not bloody surprised he was an alcoholic. How could you survive that kind of experience and not be something? But it's just, I'm just in awe of how any writer can go through that process.
When I was reading it, that was my problem. I was wondering, what is this? Is this journalism? What kind of artifact this book is? Is this journalism? Is this literature? Which parts are journalism and which parts are literature? And which new genre is this? And how it, I was wondering, I meant to ask you, how it was taken at that time when it was released, as a work of fiction or non-fiction, or what was the reaction when this book was first published?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was an enormous success, but it was also heavily criticized. And
I assume it was very criticized by the puristic.
Absolutely. And of course, it's the thing that is always the case, is that the literary establishment hates anything which is kind of so ambiguous and so successful. Probably they don't mind it being ambiguous, but they really mind it being successful. Sorry. So I think that it was, it is on one level, it was an enormous critical success, but of course, it's only probably very recently that it's been, seen as a great work of literature as well.
And who helped him to do all the research and all the
right?
Upper Lee,
Because they were neighbors, right? When they
They
were
were
young.
childhood friends.
Hmm.
They grew up together.
Get some water and cut away.
Rosa, you were talking about childhood friends who I didn't get that.
Harper Lee.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
To Kill a Mockingbird. Actually, one of the characters, To Kill a Mockingbird, it is based on Capote.
Titi.
Yes,
is Capote.
Titi, the
one called Titi.
Yeah, that one.
The little boy.
The little boy, yes.
The film was released. The film was released yesterday. I don't know if you saw it.
What
film?
No.
The film Truman Capote, about Truman Capote.
No.
Yeah, it was yesterday on television.
About his life or what?
No, about this story, about the writing, about Harper Lee and him going to Holcomb to interview people, about the whole research.
Channel?
His
What's the name of that movie?
I can't remember. It was yesterday on television.
Was it where? Do you remember? In
history? Well, in Spanish, it's Historia de un Crimen. I don't know if they kept the same title in English or not.
What channel?
I don't
Must
know.
have
It
been
was
two,
kind of 30 something. No. It wasn't on the Spanish television. Sundance television or something.
Oops, sorry.
But if you go to Guía Televisión, you can find it, I guess.
What are you talking about, Carmen?
The film that was released yesterday about, I don't know if you've seen it, about Truman Capote going to Holcomb with Harper Lee and all the researching. Yes, on television, yes.
Wow.
Yesterday or the day before, I mean.
Synchronicity, eh?
Yes.
Synchronicity.
Yes.
We're very good at that in the book club. No, seriously. The amount of times that we read a book and 6 months later it's made into a film. No, it's really...
Because you have a very cinematographic mind, then.
It's very... No, it's very
books like that.
It's Finance.
Famous, yeah.
Yes, Finance.
Around 2006, I think.
Is that the date of Capote, the one about the film about his relationship with Perry?
With Perry,
Yeah.
And the actor is, because I think that film is not very new, is this actor that died recently?
Yes.
Very complicated name, I never can remember.
Bill, yeah.
Seymour something.
No, that's not him. That's not Capote, no.
That one is Capote. The one Rosa is talking about is called Capote.
Yeah.
So
and the one
another one.
Carmen is talking about is called I don't know how.
What?
Because there are two films.
Yes.
Okay. It was.
It's called I don't know how. That's a good for a movie.
No, I remember the name in Spanish, but I can't remember. It's
infamous. It's infamous.
Infamous? Yes. Okay.
That's what the internet says. I assume it's right.
Assumptions.
Infamous, okay.
I think just coming back to what Carmen was saying earlier, I mean, I started reading this the other night because I couldn't sleep. And on page 230, I thought, I'll go to sleep now. And I think that the strange thing about reading a book like this is that it's very different from reading a book of fiction, because although the narrative is basically interchangeable with fiction, at the back of your mind, you know all the time that this is real. So the way you experience the book as a reader, I think is very different from the way you experience it as a reader of fiction. So I could easily read 200 pages of a crime novel and kind of go to bed feeling quite kind of okay and relaxed. But after reading 200 pages of this, it was kind of, it seeps into your dreams, because as you're reading it, you know that it's not fiction, it's based on real experience. And although that's a very simple distinction to make, it's a very hard one to work with as a reader. Because in a way you're feeling a little bit guilty, at least I did, about enjoying this book so much.
Yes.
But also knowing that it's about, well, probably 8 people being murdered, and of course 2 people being executed, plus the amount of psychological ruin that happens to hundreds of other people who are connected either closely or distantly. So I found it a weird experience as a reading experience. I don't know if any of you shared that.
For me, it happened quite the other way around.
Yeah.
Not that I enjoy it, but I'm so used to read fiction, non-fiction, sorry.
Yeah.
That when I was reading it, I got the impression that I was reading fiction all the time. Although I knew the story was real, but the style and the narrative and all the, you know, the way the story is constructed, it follows such, it's just a novel, although, you know, it's real. But for me, I really enjoy reading. My feeling was I'm enjoying reading non-fiction so much, reading literature, because it's just so well written.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot the idea that it was actually, I didn't forget it, but you know, I left behind the fact that it was based on a true story. I kind of forgot it was based on although obviously you know it is.
Yeah, but as Daniel says, it gets you a sad feeling at the end. It's haunting. You keep remembering, and you keep thinking, this poor girl, a life cut like that. Well, and his brother and his parents, but a young people is always sadder.
Yeah, but you know, at the same time, what I experienced reading the book is something strange, because you see this story about 2 people who are so awful, so disgusting, and so criminals and psychopaths and everything, but you're not very against them. You're against them because you know what they did, but there is something that you end up, let's say, understanding what they did, not understanding, because this is absolutely impossible to understand, but there is something that he puts you in a position to think about crime, about from a different way, from a different perspective. I mean, he's telling you, okay, these guys are disgusting, they did that, but there is an explanation to all this. So things are
With
not
one
as
of
simple
them,
as
right?
that.
Yes,
Especially with one of them.
Yeah, with
Perry.
Perry.
Is it Perry?
Yeah.
Yes, Perry.
Well, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Because I mean, Capote makes us to know them so well.
Yes.
I mean, to all of them, these 2, the 2 boys, but the family is. You are so inside the personality of these people, of these 2 boys.
In fact,
So much that when you finish the novel, the
Yes.
feeling that you have is that Perry and Dick belong to your life.
Yes.
And that they become part of your life now.
Yes.
That's the feeling I had when I finished it.
Yeah.
Right?
Completely. As the book, not only the characters, the book is in your mind. They are
all the time.
But about the feeling that you know them very well, Capote said in an interview that he ended up knowing them better than themselves. Knew themselves.
Yes, I agree.
That's an absolute perfect psychological study of these people that you.
Yes.
But that's also a very significant connection to, to writing, because also it's what many, certainly postmodernist writers or modernist and postmodernist writers have explored, is the idea that the narrator knows more about the characters than they do themselves. Now, that's not simply a matter of being able to tell us what they think. It's being able to actually let characters express themselves according to what they think they understand of their lives. And yet, by the choice of scene, setting, language, dialogues, the writer is actually putting in a second layer of telling us what's really going on in their lives. That's one of the most difficult, it's the thing we looked at really when we talked about Joyce in The Dead. You know, you have this other layer of information which comes from the writer, which the characters are probably unaware of. Capote does that here with this, whatever it is, this non-fiction novel. And he brings in that extra layer of knowledge. And it's a bit uncomfortable because, of course, this is a real story about real people. But in a way, Capote is still being a slightly godlike author who sees everything, knows everything, and understands everything. And I think that's kind of, again, maybe one of the reasons why some people could feel a bit uncomfortable with this type of writing, because you're, in a way, you know, you're setting the writer. Although I mean, I don't agree with this. It's a bit of a devil's advocate, but some people would say, you know, you can't take that position as a writer that you understand these people. You can present the facts, you can present the story, you can present the details, but you can't then suggest that you know why or how. And maybe that's the line where some people feel a bit uncomfortable with this type of fiction, non-fiction.
Because he himself, he got involved in such a deep way. That
The thing is that you don't hate the killers.
No. Just Dick, only Dick.
I hated Dick. I felt sorry.
Not really hated, like,
wow,
well, that guy. But hated?
But you don't care if he dies.
No. But you feel
But,
sorry for Perry.
Yeah, you feel sorry for Perry, and you know, after all, he was a murderer as well.
Yes.
I think in a way, don't you think, I'm sorry, this is going to sound awful, but don't you think we've all kind of, you know, met dicks? I mean, it's these people who obviously are kind of slightly psychopathic and, you know, they're sociopaths. So they're people who don't really empathize with other people, but they're very good at knowing how to, you know, to make themselves friendly and appealing. I mean, I thought it's a brilliant representation of that kind of personality. I don't know if sociopath is the right word, but that kind of personality that understands how to play people.
But this is one of the characteristics of a psychopath. Is one of the characteristics of a psychopath.
Very social skills.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Charming sometimes. Yeah.
It is true. It's been the second time that I read this book, and as Alberto was saying, I read it the first time like 30 years ago or so, and I got so many different things from this second read that I totally forgot from my first time. I enjoyed it very much the first time. I remember that. But I had this feeling that, or this remembrance that it was just a true fiction, a true crime essay or a non-fiction work, more perhaps towards journalism than anything else. But then after so many years, and after reading, I don't know, Tom Wolfe or David Foster Wallace, you have so many different takes on what it means to try and do a literary work from a non-fiction thing. And you have so many different styles. And then when I read it again now, you have the feeling that this was really the beginning of a new genre. Which nowadays it's all around us, even in television. There are so many non-fiction series based on whatever, crimes or economy, whatever, and you see this take and trying to, through the style, through the writing in this case, trying to make something different from just a non-fiction description of events. It's totally different. And this second time, I had forgot so many things about how he's, from my point of view, he's a very unreliable narrator in the sense that he gives each one their space or their due. And as you were saying, I don't think you sympathize with this or that killer or this or that victim, but he is as if he imposes himself to sympathize with each and every one of them and to describe meticulously everything about them. I felt so uneasy, so uncomfortable, reading so many things about the victims, for instance. It makes you feel like, I don't know, I don't want to know so many things about her boyfriend or what she liked to do or how she cooked, how she baked cherry pies. I'm feeling so bad about that. And I think it's wonderfully done. You end up knowing so many things about Perry or about Nancy that you feel like you're looking inside and you really feel that you shouldn't be looking like that. I think it's wonderful the way he does it.
I had that feeling, what you, Fernando, is saying, I had the feeling when looking in internet about these people, you see the pictures of the house, of their house. That is so sad to be able to see inside this house. How can anyone do that? I mean, it's their private, their privacy is very, it's awful.
I guess Capote somehow, he wanted to make a picture of the whole country. So it's a road movie, but he really wanted, because this happened in the USA, it didn't happen anywhere else. And he wanted to make that picture as well, the whole country.
Yes, and in the first part of the book, when describing the place, the town, when they stop to fill in the tank of the car, all this description of the place, as you said, it is United States.
Yes, other criminals, other murders. In a certain period as well.
There is something, let me say this, the last part of the book, I felt, is not saying something bad about the book, because I think very few things, very few bad things can be said about this book, but it was too long for me.
Yeah, me too.
From the point when they got in prison and they are in the death row, to the end, these all legal procedures that Dick starts with, because he claims he didn't kill anyone, and these legal things and that resulted for me was a little bit
it went on and on and on.
Yes, it was too much. Maybe I would have cut the book 40 pages.
Me too. I agree. Yes.
Don't you think that is in a way of showing us this long period in prison that is like boring, that is like not never ending, that is like holding, the life is holding there. You are not living, you are not being killed. It's a way of expressing being in jail.
He does that in a perfect way, but in my view, I think that the writer, he spent so many hours with these people, that he was so involved with their life, with the personality, what they have done, that because he visited them many times in prison.
Yes.
So I think he was so embedded with them that this maybe is the cause of these long pages at the end of the book.
Eugenia, you're as the only one of us who's a professional writer, how do you feel about that ending? Would you have cut that if you were editing this book? Would you have cut the ending?
No.
No?
I wouldn't.
No.
It's strange. I was comparing this book to other books of non-fiction that they could have been doing the same thing. For example, is quite different, but I don't know, Kapuscinski, I don't know if you read it, this journalist. He was recently accused, well, he passed away a few years ago, but he was accused by someone saying that, someone that he interviewed, then came out and said, no, I didn't actually say that exactly, I said this other thing. So there was kind of like a controversy if Kapuscinski was making up some of the parts of his books or he wasn't. And
But
the debate
also with Bruce Chatwin, for instance.
and even with Garcia Marquez with his non-fiction parts. So there is this debate of how close you have to be to the truth. And I think in this case he goes maybe a bit far sometimes, and maybe he goes a bit closer. I'm not sure exactly, because I don't know the facts really. I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know the story in the first place, but all my questions were how close he got to the truth, and when he decided to step a little bit back, because everybody does that. For sure, with Kapuscinski, he was probably he didn't receive that answer, but doesn't matter if the whole context is more or less real. It doesn't matter the exact same.
As if by definition, a narrator is unreliable. It says you just cannot help it.
But I think it's
connected to the end for what you said about the end. I wouldn't have changed it for that reason.
I mean, I actually agree with Alberto on one level, that I find the ending, the last part, really stressful, and you want it to end.
Yes.
You know, but I think probably that's on purpose. I think he wants, you know, he doesn't want to let you off lightly. He doesn't want you to say, okay, end of the trial, they were convicted, 5 years later they were executed. He wants you to kind of suffer that.
Or it's an atonement.
Tension, you know, like if you want to, you know, we all know what happens, we all know they're executed. If you want to, you can close the book. But in a way, he's kind of saying, we started this, and we owe it to these people to actually, you know, to everybody to go through to the end. I don't like it, but I think that as a part of a kind of artistic unity, it's essential.
And that last part, perhaps my take on that part is a sort of a question, as if he's saying, can you handle the truth? That's sort of it, because this is what happens in the end.
I think that's part of his compromise with truth, that ending. As Fernando said, I didn't enjoy reading that part.
No, I don't think anybody did.
Obviously, but I think it had to be there in order to
to compensate all the rest.
Even though the stories he tells of the other criminals in jail are fantastic, are really great stories. This legal procedure about appealing the court and
because we wanted them to finish. We wanted them to die. We wanted to kill them. We wanted to kill them right away.
What about the obsession of the suffering of the policeman, the investigator, trying so desperately to find a clue?
It's a strange character, that one.
It is.
Kansas rough investigation policeman.
One of the great characters of the book, I think, is Dewey. It was called Dewey. Dewey or
Dewey, yes. Reading this book, I felt the same way when I read Lolita by Nabokov. What really interested me, it's not the whole thing about the murder, but the secondary actors, the secondary characters, the scenery, the country, and when they go to Mexico, I remember the places there, or when, one of my favorite scenes is when they stop to collect those bottles, those Coke bottles, to sell them with the kids. That's a great one, and it's a road movie. That's why I loved it as well, because Mrs. Meyer, or
don't you?
Those secondary characters, that's the real thing.
Yeah.
The mother, the way she's described at the start, with all her depressions.
Yes. Yes.
Tony, yeah. But don't you have sometimes, perhaps it's just my view, but in this second reading, sometimes when I arrived at some of these characters and how meticulously each one of them are described, don't you think that there's some a priori statement from the writer as if he decides, I am going to give each and every one their due. It doesn't matter if they are disgusting or if they're boring or not so interesting as the main characters, but I have to describe each and every one of them in detail. You have to, because that's the only way to immerse yourself, into soak yourself with these. And it doesn't matter if they're killers, if they're moral, immoral. I don't care. I have
You've frozen, Fernando.
to give it to each of them their time. I don't know. That's my feeling.
I think that there's another element to this book that I found particularly fascinating this time, which in a way is the ability of writers to not exactly reinvent, but to adapt a genre to their time. Because when I was reading this, as you know, I'm a bit obsessed with American Southern Gothic and Gothic in general. And I was thinking that, you know, Capote himself is a Southerner. He's very strongly connected with Southern writing. And one strain in American literature, which goes back to probably The Scarlet Letter, is this whole theme about the sort of the evil, corrupt, morally ambiguous world that lies behind the apparently idyllic society, or the town or the village, which is a symbol of American goodness. And it's a theme which, as I said, you can find back in Hawthorne, and you can see it coming through Edgar Allan Poe, Kate Chopin, all these writers. And ultimately, in American Gothic, which is the obvious place for it, because here you have a society which has lost the war, which had slavery, which had all these evil secrets. But at the same time, you have this kind of this other narrative about American life, which is, you know, good, neighborly, friendly, open, honest, God's people, God's country. And I kind of wonder whether one thing that Capote does, you know, for better or for worse, is that he reinvents this kind of Gothic narrative for the post-60s world. It's not something that's gone away. It's still there. You still got this contrast between what the society likes to think of itself as and what kind of horrible, dark secrets, monsters it creates in the process. And I see a very strong link between this book and series like, well, I'm sure you did, series like True Detective, films like Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, that maybe Capote kind of reinvented the genre for modern America. It's just kind of a thought I had when I was reading it. I don't know if that...
I thought of True Detective while I was reading it.
Yeah.
It's like a flashlight, and the parts are hidden in America over
the
American dream.
Yeah.
How did he got into? I don't know if you read. If he talked a lot about this book. How he got in so much into this story?
Ooh, I'm not sure. Was he just contacted by a publisher to research it, or is that my...
No idea.
What I read is that he just read it on the newspaper,
On the
he said,
newspaper,
okay, there is a
yeah.
story there.
Yeah, me too. I read that, and he read it, and he got really interested and wanted to get involved.
Because at the time he was already famous. I mean, he was money to do that. He had money, the money, he had the time, and he went there. Because maybe it was his third or
Probably
fourth.
he was catched by the interest meeting the killers.
Well, yeah, he got the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
It's because America is just such a complex place.
It is.
And I think this book is, I don't know if you read this book about Historias de Nueva York, Enrique González. It says something quite, that America, apart from the two coasts, is just obsessed. It says something like it's sleeping between its Bibles, its religion, and its guns.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of this world where this story takes place too.
Yeah, this cultural expression tells a lot about the past of a country, or the important things of a country. Some American guy said that Spanish expressions are mostly around food, and American expressions are mostly about guns. Like the son of a gun, they say, when they want to say, "Eres la leche." Always like that, yes.
That was actually an English expression.
Yeah?
That was actually an English expression.
Is it?
Yeah.
You were talking about
Inherit.
You were talking about some TV series about this twofold American landscape, let's say. I don't know if you've watched, perhaps it was last year or 2 years ago, a series called, a mini-series called Sharp Objects.
No.
Object, I saw it.
Southerner.
Yeah. Exactly.
Extremely high class.
So what's the name? Sorry, Fernando. What was the name? Sharp Object.
I'll write it down here for you.
Thank you.
I think it was an HBO. I don't remember.
I think it is.
Sharp Objects.
Sure. No, I haven't heard
No,
of
I've
it.
not seen it. No.
Very dark.
Very dark. Very dark.
Yeah.
With extremely dark behind a patina of class, something elegance, let's say.
Yeah.
It was quite good. Yeah. Yeah, it reminded me of this book.
In a way, maybe this doesn't have a lot have to do with this, but I remember that book you read called The Bloody Project. Do you remember?
Yes.
A Bloody Project. Yes.
Wonderful book, yeah.
Yeah, what's wonderful.
Scottish murderers this time, Eugenia.
Excuse me?
Sorry?
Scottish murderer.
Yeah.
That was a very good
There's so many. There's so many.
Oh, come on.
I just remembered it because it was also a murder.
Yeah, it reminded me too.
Me too.
But because of the feeling, we felt sorry for the kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we read the novel.
Yes.
The same way we feel sorry for
Yes, in a way.
Miss Perry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But it was a very good choice, Daniel.
But I think
Tough one.
that whole question of empathy is probably the key to it, is that, if you are a relatively well-adjusted person, it's very difficult not to feel empathy for people who suffer.
Yeah.
And then you're thrown into this very difficult situation where you know that someone has done something terrible, but you also see what kind of misery they've endured. And so you can't, unless you are a sociopath, it's very difficult to hold back your empathy for somebody. Once you begin to know and put yourself in their shoes and imagine what kind of misery they experienced as children, as teenagers, as young adults, the sexual abuse, the fear, the alcoholism, as I think, Capote really wants us to recognize, is that our moral nature is very, very complicated. We're moving constantly between this a sort of public and private sense of right and wrong. We know, in the public sense, we know killing someone is terrible and killing someone requires a punishment. But at a private level, we can understand that someone who kills someone might not be an awful person. They might have suffered terribly themselves. And so we're conflicted because we're trying to square the circle in a way. How do we make sense of these two perspectives? And I think he's doing that all the time. I don't know whether it's a feeling you have, but he's constantly kind of putting you in that very uncomfortable position of how do I judge things from as a collective perspective, and how do I judge things as a individual who knows things about somebody. And that's a very uncomfortable position.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about these two murderers is that they didn't have any reason at all to kill anyone.
No.
Yeah.
So, but they did it. And so this is the thing that I think Capote was more attracted with, because there was not a motive apart from just eliminating the witnesses. It was the only reason to do that, but it was no had feelings against them. There was nothing.
They didn't know them at all.
They didn't know them.
Yes.
Right. It's a pure absurd killing.
Yeah.
And there remains, quite apart from the book, there remains the very, very strong probability that they murdered the 4 people in Florida.
In
Florida.
The other 4.
Yeah.
And when you said that, before you said they killed 8 people, I thought, I don't think they killed them, but you don't know.
It wasn't proven, as you probably read. There was an autopsy done about 12 years ago to try and match DNA from Perry and the other one to these murders in Florida, which also seems to have included a rape of the daughter. The fact that it happened just miles away from where they were staying in Tallahassee is a very difficult coincidence to ignore. But the tests were inconclusive due to the decay of DNA evidence. But this is the other piece of the non-novelistic puzzle. How come a family, a husband and wife, a son and a daughter, were murdered only miles from where they were staying?
But don't you think that if that were true, they would have told it to Capote when they were talking to him, because they were lost?
This is what makes it very weird, is because they took this lie detector test.
Yes.
Which apparently they passed. And it's very weird that particular story. I think, as Alberto said, your immediate thought is, surely after admitting to everything else, they'd admit to those as well. I don't know. I haven't read anything about it. My initial feeling was that maybe there's something to do with the fact that there was a rape in the second murders. Because Perry has always got this big thing about, there are things I put up with, but I don't have a problem with shooting someone in the head, but I do have a problem with sort of having sex with a teenage girl.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, I have to go, but thanks a lot. I'll
Thanks
see you soon. We'll keep in touch. Take care. Bye.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye, Eugenia.
Bye.
So I think there's a whole other story there which we'll never know.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm afraid I have to leave as well. So
we all have to go.
Okay.
I hope you all take care.
Keep in touch.
And you, Fernando. Good to see you.
So
See you tomorrow.
see you next time.
Some of you.
Yes, some
Oh, yes.
So,
Well,
okay.
I'll see you on Monday then.
So
Okay.
Carmen, I'm glad to hear you really enjoyed the book.
I really did.
Oh,
Yeah.
which Carmen? Me or
Both.
the?
Oh, both.
No, kitchen.
Both, I guess.
Oh,
You.
Kitchen Carmen.
yes, all of us.
Okay.
We enjoyed very much, very much.
Yeah,
Okay, good evening.
yeah. Good choice.
Okay, we'll see you soon then.
Yes.
Not tomorrow, right?
No, I got the message. I got the message today. I mean,
Okay.
it's always the same thing. And my brother forgot to tell me. But next time I will. Now
Okay.
now we can read.
Your fault. It's your fault.
My fault.
Yeah.
Okay.
Daniel, thank you so much for the meeting. It was
Thanks
so
a lot,
nice.
Carmen. Good to see
So
you.
nice to see you.
Yeah. And thank you, Dan, for the book, because
Yes, thank you.
It was
And Rosa, will you send that email again?
Yes,
Yeah.
sure, I will.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. It's really enjoyable.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.
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 Bye
Thank
now.
you.
Bye.
Bye.